Although it was a complete surprise, the work was done for her. Nobody came to stop her. Nothing was in her path. Sender, Empress and War General of Nox, continued to march on, epaulets in hand, as the 23-signet crown adorned her regal, jet-black hair. The city she had spent months planning to take over, to usurp the false prophet king, was literally vacant. Homes and streets, bars and temples, pubs, workshops, all silent of any human noise. Just the hollow brushing of wind echoed as the chilled, blue sky loomed overhead. She marched at the head of the company, in the middle of the 3 platoons. In file, holding rank, soldiers marched with gusto in their step. There was a smoldering zeal that burned within the Noxish soldiers, and Sender commanded it as a moon orbits a world. She demanded obedience. But even in religion and a country that demanded perfect obedience to the 23 creeds, Sender would sense a cautious optimism from the army who marched alongside her. They approached the steps of the center palace. "Halt," she commanded, and her fellow platoon commanders repeated the orders. "We pace at 5th speed," and the commanders redoubled the instruction. The company essentially came to a moderate walk. Boots were plodding on the stone. Peering as she wandered through the open gates, the halls and cathedral sprawled before Sender's eyes. Empty. Beautiful granite and stone polished by years upon years of labor. Magnificent architecture brazened by pearl whites and gilded touches. Statues of Endacnius's characters in lore and history, the alleged first of Tulum, harvester of the 4th moon, and one erected of the king himself, Endacnius, all heresies. 3 false altars sat at the head of the cathedral, and obsidian steps among the sides of the walls brought the palace up to a 2nd level, wider and more open. Still empty. It took around 20 minutes just to get all the soldiers up to the higher ground. This was the allure of the Tuluman Palace, a grand series of halls and cathedral that was looked upon by Endacnius himself. The 2nd level was about 50 yards in length, but stretched even further out on its sides. Great pillars carved with symbols of the kingdom, like the first horn, decorated the room. A rich culture and people, one which Sender despised, but, in an academic way at least, appreciated. Yet, nobody was here. "Halt!" The 100 soldiers stood silently. Sender walked over to Zalkin, her cousin, and also war priestess of the western region, who watched over the left platoon. "Zal," Sender let out, "what do you make of this?" She took in a deep breath. "An anomaly, Empress. I pray to the signets we find an answer soon." Even being family, given the formal circumstances and the strict Empress to priest hierarchy, a terse and vague reply was appropriate. Sender would have to press a bit firmer to get any sort of information out of her cousin. "Is that so?" Sender asked again. "Yes, Empress," Zalkin replied. "Why are they not here? What prophecy could be among the 23 to have taken them?" She was prodding for something. Zalkin could feel that much. "Empress Sender," Zalkin said with a tinge more forthrightness, "I do not know. There is the prophecy of fire upon the continent. There is the great freezing and forever famine, but nothing applicable to an entire disappearance. The priesthood would need to converge and study the sanctum to understand the meaning." Sender sighed. What she got out of her cousin was more or less of the same. "I don't know and I can't say." She took a minute and walked the way over to the right platoon. The central king Jonder, the monarch who'd rule directly under Sender in the main prefecture of Nox, could have been of more help. On paper, an empress-to-king relation was just as hierarchical as an empress-to-priest one, but there was a level of friendship and equality surprisingly present between Jonder and Sender. "Zalkin doesn't know what to make of the situation, Jonder. What is your suggestion?" "It's a free taking, Empress," Xander quickly replied. He was used as king for his war-hungry and zealous mentality, and his solutions always had a proclivity towards the aggressive. Remember that all who oppose the Noxish are for us to absorb. This could be the grace of the 23rd. Perhaps you're right, Cinder chuckled to herself. A more theological response from Xander than Zal. I might offend some of the priesthood, but this is the right decision. Cinder walked forward to the center of the room, in front of the throne. She saw it, the sword, and understood it was true. They were completely abandoned. The city was free to take. The land was empty and ready to be annexed. Why turn around now? This, Cinder pulled the sword from the stone. In the other hand she continued holding the epaulets. This is a gift of Epicentranian. Zalkin gasped. She was invoking the name of the 23rd itself. Of course, the 23rd was the most powerful and infinite, most holy and full of all the divinities. Her cousin was truly receiving the message of gods themselves, as she must have been to invoke the name. Xander smirked. It was as he suspected. I knew it, he burst out to himself, as if winning a bet in the most sacrilegious way possible. He was so crass when it came to Noxishism, yet so committed to proving himself right through it. The 23rd has declared it, and so we must accept it. Cinder went along the words as her confidence rose in delivering them. Our battles have proven worthy. The ancient plains of northeastern Nox will be welcomed back into the great forever kingdom. Rejoice in the 23rd. The crowd echoed back. Rejoice in the 23rd. Despite her hesitancy, Zalkin took in her words. It was declared by the Empress in the name of the 23rd. This conquest is canonized. Zalkin pulled herself up in front of the throne before Cinder. It was time to engage in the landing. Today, the priest began, Nox has been fulfilled. The 17th prefecture is returned to our kingdom. She knelt at the feet of the Empress. Epicentranian. The hearkening of this land shall be known as Lilith. The soldiers chanted the names of the 23 signets, repeating the name of the new prefecture after each one. This was to symbolize the Noxishist blessings pouring through the land. The chant finished at the 22nd, leaving the 23rd to be named and stated again by Cinder herself. Zalkin returned to the front of her company. Now, Cinder proceeded, the naming of the 17th king. Xander walked to the front of the Empress. He turned to face the 3 platoons. The tradition of battle-won kingdoms repeats again today, men. With the 23 blessing my mind and my sword, the kingdom of Nox grows. He jolted his epaulets up into the air, and the crowd did the same with theirs, cheering. The murmurs and the yells began to converge, and in a few moments the entire company was chanting one word in unison, louder than drums. King! 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 Xander was smirking, and while Cinder tried to remain stoic, she also could not hold a straight face for too long. The king naming was certainly a tradition, but it was the least refined or procedural part of the landing ritual. There was nothing in the doctrine that determined this part besides elect a king, so the soldiers had turned to a more fraternized approach, chanting, stomping, and in many an occasion drunken tomfoolery had all somehow slid into the doctrine. It was a part of the culture that was often ignored when retelling the legend to the future. It has been decided! Xander burst out like a child, excited to share a new discovery. Bring me that in Dacnius's head, from the statue. The one who takes it will be king. Curse the false prophet and the might of the 23. A large hurrah grew from the crowd as many broke ranks and sprinted to the back of the room. Men breaking protocol and pushing each other over the steps to the cathedral in a hurried rush as if to be the first to a freshly made meal. Within 5 minutes, a group of about 20 men were stabbing, pushing, jumping, and pummeling into the statue of the floor below. Xander watched and cheered on from above, and the roughly 80 other men were in groups surrounding the statue, cheering their allies on, forming sects within the company as friends and rivals appeared in this bizarre sport, deciding the king of the next prefecture. The women were left alone by the throne. Xander will have his way as he always does, won't he? Zalkin chided Sender. The formal restrictions that had been washing over them drifted away briefly as they were alone. There's no stopping that, cousin, Sender confirmed. But it's a welcome distraction. I know you'll pick the right prefectural priest. So however Xander goes about the king matters little to me. I suppose, she said. Sender hobbled over and took her seat on the throne in a slightly joking manner. Right elbow on the stone-carved armrest, she propped up her head as a rest for her chin. Sender's eyes looked to Zalkin as more of a cousin than an empress. Zalkin felt the pressure. I swear to you, Sender, there's nothing. Omitting the empress title made Sender's eyebrows rise and her grin grow. If I had any idea, I would tell you, Zalkin pleaded. You're known as one of the most conservative priests as well as my quietest cousin. It's why you're the first pick of the rotation for landing conquests. Your conjectures are never outlandish. Your logic is always sound, Zal. And that's why I'm telling you, Zalkin repeated. I have no idea what happened. The battle prayers and the religious dogma tell you so much. I warned you we'd need espionage. Sender's smile turned in a moment as she shot a glance towards Zalkin. Zalkin quickly interjected, covering herself with words. Had we had spies, we'd know Indacnius was gone the day it happened. We'd know where Talum went, Zalkin reasoned. You know espionage is off the table, Sender replied with a taut expression. Her glare was frozen from across the throne. I don't know why you subscribe to that tenet, Empress. Zalkin reverted to the formal title in defense. The sixth, the sword and power, cunning and courage, will see through falsehoods and bring truth upon the world, Sender stated simply, quoting a verse. Zalkin, espionage and seeing through falsehoods cannot be considered part of the same kingdom if we are— Your interpretation is totally arbitrary, Zalkin cut in with a twinge of anger. She immediately cringed at the words that had just escaped her, and she found herself frowning with an apologetic bow. Sender looked at her cousin patronizingly, but let her go on. To invoke the sixth in this way is simply selective and limiting Nox. You must remember, I am guided by the signets, cousin. As Empress, I am also the head priest and the leader of our country. Why do you question my authority now? Zalkin held in a sigh. No, I do not question you. Your will is ultimate, the message of the 23. Correct. Sender had expected to put an end to that conversation with that, and there was silence for a moment. A look between both the priest and the Empress, and understanding there was a level of arbitrariness to their selection either way. Yes, it was against the mainstream theological position to hold that espionage was off the table, but it could be just as arbitrary for the theologians to hold a pro-espionage position themselves. As if out of necessity, Zalkin coded on the conversation a verse. The 15th, domination and unity, rule and order, ice and snow, will choose the paths for triumph to take hold. That's right, cousin. The faint smile returned to Sender. Let the signets guide us. As the 23rd has graced this land to us, so too will the signets, in their fullness, sanctify the Noxish quest. Sanctify indeed. Zalkin let out almost with a slight sigh of defeat. Since her ascension to the title of Empress, there was no doubt that Sender had a strained relationship with her cousin. Friends as children, both part of a privileged royal life, they had grown up trusting one another as equals, and although the inevitable advancement of Sender strained this ideal, There was a clear effort to maintain this friendship. Something had changed, however, in the last few years. The empire expanded, landings grew more frequent, and wartime religiosity grew more fervent. Zalkin feared her role was becoming denigrated, more and more to one of utility rather than one of simple friendship. But such doubts were heretical, and Zalkin swallowed them down. She looked back at her cousin, so fierce, so strong. Her plate was colored with the 23 hues, each section giving a divine protection from the signets themselves. Thin, malleable, yet sturdy and durable, the tempered metal appeared ritualistic, but was more practical than any kingdom could dream of. Her crown, however, was ceremonial, as was her signature tattoo on her neck, a rune of the 14th signet. It wasn't uncommon for women to tattoo their personal signets on their body, and the Empress certainly helped to enforce this fashion. Sender adjusted her gaze and appeared to warm up a bit. Come, why don't we take a look at the army? Zalkin nodded, and Sender walked up from the throne, grabbing epaulets and sword. They both strolled across the granite and made their way toward yonder. An Empty Kingdom, Part 1.